How do you deal with Vladimir Putin? Well, welcome to Mark and Pete, two blokes with half an opinion. Now, here is a thought.
Stamp of authority. There once was a Russian named Vladimir who made a career from spreading fear. He would stamp his authority upon any majority. Now he is forceful on every frontier. Yes, it appears that Vladimir Putin is not as easy to deal with as some people think. Isn't that right, Donald Trump? Because although they have spoken in recent times about the Ukraine war, it appears that Putin has given very little to Donald Trump in terms of concessions. Well, how do you actually deal with a man set on gaining further territory? The Ukraine war still continues. Mr. Pete, I ask you, when we think about conflict, surely it's about people's lives, but we're not dealing necessarily with rational people. So how do you deal with Vladimir Putin?
Well, I think I think that it's a mistake to think that Putin isn't rational. I mean, he comes from a different culture. He comes from a different point of view than us in the West, Mr. Mark. But I think within his own worldview, he's been entirely rational. He comes from with a different view of history. He sees how Russia has been hemmed in by NATO. He sees how going back further, Ukraine is the actual historical homeland of Russia, and the borderlands even speak Russian today, and those are the parts that he initially invaded. And prior to that, there was the problem with NATO, the North Atlantic Treaty Organization, put together by the Western powers after the Second War, pushing forward, and in fact claiming that, oh yes, Ukraine is going to be part of NATO. Now this
Yes.
triggered Putin, I believe, into taking Crimea because that's where a lot of the Russian warships are moored. I mean, and people in Europe, in NATO, in America at the time knew this, didn't they? So why would you provoke him in that way? And then let's just fast forward, say why I think Putin has been rational in his approach here. If you take it from the point of view, not that he wants to expand necessarily, but he thinks he has rights to certain bits of land, the bits of land I've outlined, the southeastern region of Ukraine, and then I suppose really further down, Crimea, um, which isn't part of Ukraine at the moment because he took it. Um, the Donbass region, the other region there that Putin first went into. It was indicated publicly by Biden. I don't know if you remember him. He used to be president of the United States. He gave the impression that it wouldn't matter. Small incursion wouldn't matter. He said so. He gave a green light to Putin to do it, to do what he did. It was entirely rational. And then suddenly the Western powers just pile on to him, pile on to Putin, instead of doing something different, which is the Trump approach, which is something very simple. That is this: talk to him, at least talk to him. During a recent interview with Putin, very very interesting that they've been at war for 3 years. You know, the war going on in Ukraine for 3 years, and he hadn't spoken to Biden once.
There you go. Yeah. Well, to me, that's one of the keys to this. Whether you like Donald Trump or whether you do not, the one thing that he is good at is bringing people to the table and negotiating. And to your point,
I thought you were going to say he's good at talking.
Well, he's good at talking.
That's true.
Well, that's a matter of debate. But the fact of the matter is, he knows how to do the art of the deal. It's even published, but
it's his claim it is true. Yeah.
But the point here is, it's true that when you have somebody as a forceful nature, without any doubt, a very powerful man, Vladimir Putin, for many, many years, he has been a pariah in the Western world, and frosty relationships have really sort of set those relationships backwards, in my opinion. Now we have a new US administration. That is different. The approach is very much to engage, to talk, to speak, and try and actually discuss some of the issues. Ironically, not just about Ukraine. It also goes on to things like the Middle East. So, Donald Trump and his administration have been talking to Putin about, global security. And I think that here's the thing, that really what that means from Putin's perspective is it's not a complete olive branch, but it is an opportunity to engage. So there is a little bit of hope. The challenge is this. Let's take the step back to the man Vladimir Putin. He clearly has been open in terms of the history of Russia and some of the challenges. If you think about him as an individual, where he came from, he sort of grew his career through the KGB. You had the USSR, that's obviously disbanded. You've seen what's happened from some of the challenges economically. There's been sanctions placed on Russia, and that's been quite damaging for them as well as others. Similarly, the reaction on global pricing for gas, oil, etc. And ironically, I don't think anybody's in a good position at this stage. So whether it's Russia, whether it's Ukraine, whether it's Europe, whether it's whatever, at the moment, what I do think is good is that Donald Trump at least has started to bring people to the table. The question is, though, I still come back to, how do you get to a deal? How do you get to that position where Vladimir Putin can still go back to his fellow countrymen in Russia to make it appear as though he is still winning the game, whilst at the same time the conflict stops, because that's ultimately what we want. We don't want people dying. We don't want buildings and infrastructure destroyed, because that is still happening. So what is it? Is the negotiation, as Donald Trump talks about, is you have to hold a certain amount of cards? Vladimir Zelensky saw that famously in that ignominious situation in the Oval Office.
Yes.
You don't
Yes,
have the
true.
cards, Vladimir. But the bottom line is that Donald Trump does have cards. Is it an economic pressure? Is it a business deal? Because if you think about it, no matter how strong Russia might be militarily, it can't go on indefinitely without trade.
Yeah. Yeah. I would agree. Yes. And but I think the thing that's I think been ignored, overlooked maybe by the movement towards war in the US, which Biden succumbed to or was part of, is this to believe that you can have this war of attrition by proxy in Ukraine and weaken Russia. And that has been the avowed intent of it. Mitt Romney, who was at a meeting talking about this, Senator Mitt Romney was saying that you could weaken Russia without losing American lives. So he saw the the Ukrainian conflict as a good thing, and I think he was saying the real reason behind it. They thought they could weaken Russia, but Russia's economy is different
Oh yeah,
to that of smaller countries because Russia has this huge landmass, and as Donald Trump put it, it's a lot of real estate. They've got a lot of earth with a lot of rare earths. In other
yes,
words, they've got it well. They're rich in minerals there. And so they've got that background behind them. So they don't have to be wealthy in terms of money. They're wealthy in terms of resources.
yes,
They've also got a lot of gas and oil. So that means that they can keep going, but not at but only if they can in some way sell their resources. Right?
yes,
They're going to use a certain amount themselves. So therefore, it comes down to what one thing you were talking about earlier, trade. But I think trade is the carrot. If you give them trade, then as well as being it's both the carrot and the stick, if you like. If um if they're not able to trade, not able to sell their oil and gas at a high enough price, they can't fund the war,
yes,
and they're in trouble in terms of their economy. But if you come to a nice trade deal with them, then suddenly they're wealthy. But you'll only do that if there's no war. That's the way the negotiation can work, and I believe that's what Trump's heading for. He's looking um, to take getting American rights to mine minerals in Ukraine and in
Yeah.
Russia, and he's said as much. So I'm just reading between the lines here, and that was the deal, the much touted deal that wasn't signed when Zelensky rather went to the White House. He didn't sign this mineral deal. The idea is that Trump can go in there, well, no, American companies rather, because of Trump's arrangements with Zelensky, could go into Ukraine, and that's sort of a move towards peace. Because once you've got Americans in there, it's no longer will be a proxy war if Americans are attacked by Russia, and then also if you then have a deal with uh, American companies mining in Russia, Russia gets revenue from it, and America gets minerals. So that's the classic what Trump deal that he's going for, a win-win situation, because it may not happen. It's risky, and it depends on two things. One, to start with, the price of oil and gas going down, so Russia can't afford it to run the war forever, and secondly, them agreeing to this deal with minerals, both Ukraine and Russia. I believe that's the two-pronged approach he's going for. Uh, what do you think? I think it could work.
Well, I think it could work, but I still come back to, and I'm going to come. I agree with you that the natural resources, the minerals, absolutely, without any doubt, is a primary negotiation term. I also come back to looking at the bigger picture, which is business, because business is tied to those resources, but tied also independently of those resources. It's interesting that since the invasion in 2022 of Ukraine, a lot of companies, corporate companies, have seen a mass exodus from Russia. Not all of them. Some of them have decided to stay for different reasons, but a lot of them have taken a corporate policy, whether it be tech companies, retail companies, and many other manufacturing companies, and so on. And as a result, they have lost hundreds of billions of dollars. Similarly,
Yes.
so too has Russia. And
Mhm.
here's the thing, it will take time to rebuild those corporate um, negotiations and collaborations to get them back in. Now, some companies can
Yeah.
spin up very, very quickly, whereas others, where you're building infrastructure like a manufacturing plant, or let's say, for example, if you need the right type of skills, even in a corporate environment, an enterprise environment, you don't necessarily do that literally overnight. So to me, in the negotiations, I'm sure that this is happening in the background, because if it isn't, it should be. It's what does a negotiation really look like, and what looks right, not just from the point of view of solving the conflict, because everybody's very quite rightly focusing on that side of it, and it's more evident, as we can see, both in the media and for those who are in Ukraine and on the borders of Russia and other places. But it's the bigger picture. How do you get back to where society was, where people were more freely trading with Russia? And I don't just mean on the oil and gas side, I'm talking about on the business side, those goods that typically you would have on food or tech companies and many other different things. To me, there has to be a stage planning, because I think that's really where we need to start, breaking, dare I say, the virtual borders um, on business. And I think that ultimately that will get Russia back in to the table. It may be difficult, because I think a lot of people from NATO and many others are sort of perhaps have a view of Vladimir Putin. And Vladimir Putin
Yes.
is not going away. So coming back to the how do you deal with Vladimir Putin, to me, this is my
Yes.
view.
Yeah.
You've got to bring him back
Yeah.
to the table. And at the moment, he is not. He's ostracized, and that is not good. Now, okay, he's being in the negotiations and the discussions about the war, but I come back to the bigger table. How do you get him round the business table? Because that shows that he can gain whilst the other things are happening. So I think this is where Donald Trump plays. I also think it's where the EU needs to rethink things. I'm still very concerned about the Europe and UK approach to this. More and more troops are being placed or resources are being placed there. I don't like the direction it's going there. I understand the loyalty and the commitment to Ukraine, but to me, I think that some politicians are missing the bigger picture. I don't see how you can negotiate with Vladimir Putin just purely on the war itself, personally.
No, yeah, yeah. Oh, yes, yes. I think there's a key point there. It's part of an overall relationship. It's part of the world economy.
Yes.
Then it's going to work. Yeah, and that's what was missing before. That Russia was increasingly
Yeah.
isolated.
The
Yes,
individuals that we are talking about that are doing the negotiations absolutely are doing a great job from what we've seen over previous regimes in the way that America dealt with this. So I think it is heading in the right
yeah.
direction. What I do believe is that what now needs to happen is an acceleration because every day that's going by, every month, every quarter, unfortunately, not only is trade being lost, lives are being lost, more conflict. The longer this goes on, the harder it is. Completely, in my opinion, the harder it is to get Vladimir Putin and any of his cabinet and any of his political colleagues or military colleagues back to the table in a way that can bring peace. Donald Trump wants it. He's made that clear. What now needs to happen is we need to find a solution quickly. And let's hope that those individuals have got that intent and, most importantly, can resolve the problem this year.
We'd love to have your views. Just go to markandpete.com and you can make a comment on this and, in fact, every episode. But for Mark and myself, it's goodbye for now, and we'll catch you next time.